There's a jigsaw you can't buy in any toy shop, but you do end up paying for it. When you fit the pieces together, you get the latest design for the new EU flag. You can see that flag here. You might think that embedding the swastika is illegal in Germany, but that's not the case, because it was designed by Adolf Merkel herself. Okay, let's break this jigsaw down to its component pieces, and we'll look at the first piece, which is Deutsche Bank's funding of terrorists, in particular ISIS, or whatever you want to call them. Now, the first piece was discovered by me in my lawsuits against Deutsche Bank for gold rigging. Deutsche Bank stonewalled my invitation to share my bullion trading receipts with co-defendants, while at the same time of accusing me of not particularizing the receipts. My suspicion was that it had destroyed receipts to cover its liabilities in over-the-counter bullion trading, that we now know it rigged by its own disclosures. I told my suspicions to 4 judges: Simon Brown QC, Charles Haddon Cave, Ian Burnett, and the Lord Chief Justice. All I ever got back from them was dumb judges parroting the defence that receipts were not particularized. Now, a few months after my final appeal, the Financial Times disclosed the Financial Conduct Authority had secretly found Deutsche Bank guilty of money laundering control violations, accusing it of potentially laundering money for terrorists, and they find it. At the same time, Reuters disclosed BaFin had fined it too, for similar allegations. Then came Deutsche Bank's confessions in New York, which showed it had lied to the UK High Court and Court of Appeal about everything. I informed the Lord Chief Justice of these confessions directly, without delay. Also, early in 2016, the New Yorker magazine released an article that alleged a $10 billion money laundering operation between Deutsche Bank's Russian offices to London to capitalize upon sanction violations. They had accused Deutsche Bank of laundering bullion to Russia in my first hearing, and the judge, Simon Brown, had dismissed it with a wave of his hand, even though he knew Deutsche Bank were refusing to disclose receipts. Simon Brown was the judge happy for defendants to launder money. Now, the Lord Chief Justice, as head of the Court of Appeal, is responsible for the integrity of the court, and he was notified every stage of these developments. I also demanded from him to know if a transcript of my court hearing existed under Simon Brown QC. He stonewalled that demand 5 times, in violation of the Data Protection Act, and in the end I had to contact the Information Commission Office, who confirmed that the transcript never existed. So obviously the Lord Chief Justice was hiding the plain fact that Lord Ian Burnett of the Court of Appeal did not have the materials to dismiss 20 allegations of misconduct against Simon Brown. So the Lord Chief Justice was covering up yet another bent judge, and in so doing incriminated himself in all of these affairs. Now, time and time again, I had demanded Deutsche Bank disclose its receipts to prove it had not destroyed them, and each time they stonewalled me. There was no question that the courts knew that Deutsche Bank either would not or could not deliver the receipts. So I emailed a number of political and legal officers suggesting they cross-reference Deutsche Bank's over-the-counter bullion trading receipts with known terrorists on the terrorist watch lists. This could be used to establish who was potentially funding terrorists in Germany. All parties stonewalled. Now, HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenues and Customs, the taxman in the UK, under the command of its head, John Thompson, issued a request on my behalf to the Serious Fraud Office, demanding receipts and an investigation for money laundering, which is public domain material after the New Yorker disclosures. The The Serious Fraud Office refused without good explanation. The head of the Serious Fraud Office is the Attorney General, Jeremy Wright MP. Also supervising the Serious Fraud Office is the Justice Select Committee of Parliament. So I wrote to all members of the Justice Select Committee, headed by Bob Neal MP. He wrote back and said that he represented everyone on that committee and said that he would be ignoring me, and he refused to cross-examine the heads of the Serious Fraud Office and the Attorney General on why they were not investigating Deutsche Bank for gold rigging that it's now confessed to, and money laundering when it's been fined twice. I'd also emailed my letter, which I originally sent to the Treasury Committee, to the Justice Committee, and that showed that more than a year before Deutsche Bank's confession, that showed that the FCA and the SFO knew that Deutsche Bank's audits were rigged. So to conclude our first jigsaw piece, Deutsche Bank were laundering money. They've almost certainly destroyed over-the-counter bullion trading receipts to cover up such laundering, and the British judiciary let them get away with it all the way to the top. The Attorney General, the Lord Chief Justice, and every member of the Justice Select Committee actively helped Deutsche Bank. And by refusing to cross-reference the over-the-counter sales receipts to known terrorists, allowed Deutsche Bank to fund terrorists. Now, Jigsaw Piece 2. The EU has recently claimed it wants to prevent bullion entering the EU. This was recorded on Zero Hedge. You can find the article there. And the EU says it's because it believes bullion funds terrorists. Well, this is old news. ISIS using bullion to trade between munitions and oil in the Middle East is well known. So there we have Jigsaw Piece 2, that the EU confirms that terrorists are funded by bullion. Jigsaw Piece 3, we come to the EU Army, the plan for which was kept secret by the EU and the British establishment under David Cameron prior to the Brexit referendum. And you can figure Theresa May, as Home Secretary, would probably be in on that. Now, the final part of the jigsaw that puts these all together is a WikiLeaks leak that incriminates German intelligence, showing that they were actively recruiting ISIS migrants. So Merkel's opened the borders, ISIS is coming through, and German intelligence, rather than capture them or send them back or tag them, recruits them. So now you've got the four pieces of the jigsaw. When you put those together, you've got a conspiracy of the EU that includes the elite of the British government to use Deutsche Bank as a vector to fund ISIS, who are trained by German intel to commit terrorist atrocities in the EU, so that the EU can turn around and justify an EU army. Now, when Cameron did a Blair and attempted to turn Syria into an anarchy, just as Blair has turned Iraq into an anarchy, and the French and the Americans have turned Libya into an anarchy, well, consider that Etonian elitist Cameron holds the average UK citizen in just as much contempt as he has contempt for the average Syrian. There's no way that any PM in the UK does not get these intelligence reports. So our EU elite want to do to the EU what they tried to do to Syria, using the same insurgent forces funded by the same sources. And that's what the Lord Chief Justice covered up, along with the Attorney General and every member of the Justice Committee. The Fourth Reich.